Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm really excited about today's guest, Sanjit Singh, based out of Seattle. He's a startup founder and revenue leader, and he's currently the CEO of Boltt, which provides fractional sales leadership to early stage companies. And he's had an extensive background and experience in entrepreneurship, startup entrepreneurship, technology, and I'm really excited about this show for the audience. So, Sanj, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Dr. Lou.
Yeah, I know you had, we connected through Podmatch, and so, kind of 2-3 minute your story, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of it.
Sure. So my story in a nutshell, I started my career working in sales, and then very quickly moved into sales management with large Fortune 500 companies, and then started my first company or business, in 2007, and started my first tech startup in 2013. Exited that in 19, started another, and then I realized, in meeting so many other founders, that I was a little bit unusual having a sales and marketing background. So a lot of my founder friends started calling me for help with sales and marketing, and that sort of pulled me into what I do now, which is being fractional head of sales for early stage companies.
Yeah, I've heard this term of fractional. So kind of describe what is this concept?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was introduced to it when I was running LeadCrunch, one of my startups, and heard that you could actually hire a very experienced executive. In this case, it was a CFO. In a fractional way, meaning we're just buying a percentage of their time. And I was immediately sold. I said, you could get someone with that level of experience who can not only help you with the tactical things, but also with, strategic things. So I hired at least a few fractional CMOs over the course of a few startups. And then I didn't really see anybody doing it for sales. And when my people started asking me, I said, well, I might as well just do the same thing, but for sales. Now I'm part of a group called Fractionals United, which has fractional everything. And so it's becoming very popular for two reasons. I think on my side, it's becoming popular as a provider because there's a lot of layoffs and executives are looking for something maybe a little bit different to do. Use their time in a different, maybe a more focused way. And on the company side, because they're, in the economy, their budgets are drying up, they can hire somebody with a lot of experience for a lot less money.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like this, basically this idea of just, instead of pouring all your you kind of like divide your time and resources appropriately, which is the smarter way to do it. So then, you talked about your sales and marketing background in a startup, and it sounds like you're a serial entrepreneur. So kind of, for people interested in, startup entrepreneurship, what kind of skills are kind of traditionally seen, and, what kind of skills on the margins will give you an edge in this industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to start a company in the tech space, it really helps to have let's say if you're a solo founder, it helps if you're technical. It really helps. And I think if you're not technical like me, it's really good to partner with someone who's technical. I've seen people with who are not technical. When I say technical, of course, I mean, they can code and actually build technology. Because I know most of your audiences, a lot of your audience may be physicians or other professions. But I've seen people, it sometimes works, but usually it doesn't, where they hire an offshore team, which would be the worst case scenario, or they hire an onshore team to build something, and then they're going to, run a business around it. That's very hard because you really don't have anybody with skin in the game who really understands the technology, the ins and outs of it. It's not a one-time thing. You build a product, it's a box, and then you sell boxes. it's a living, breathing thing that needs to evolve. And so I think that would be a critical piece of advice that I wish a lot of friends of mine had before they went about it another way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting to hear, how kind of your diverse skill set and how you made it. One thing is talking about is kind of at the ground level, how to avoid the 10 biggest mistakes in startup.
Well, there's probably way more than 10, but I'll cover some of them. I think the biggest startup issues that I see. So when I think about it, I look at CB Insights is a data provider that provides data on private companies, and they're great. And they provided a infographic where it showed the top 10 reasons startups fail, and the two biggest reasons, which accounted for nearly 3/4 or 75% of startup failures. One was no market need, and the other was ran out of cash. So let's talk about those for a second. So no market need means, and I know this sounds crazy, but a lot of us do this all the time, and if you think about it, we all do it, and you have to fight the tendency to do it, which is to say, I have a great idea, I know it's great, I don't need to talk to my customer because I'll build it and show it to them and then blow their minds, right? And that's really not how things, that's not the best way to go about it. So we have this concept, product market fit, which you're probably well aware of, where you go and you interview your potential customer audience. You want to make sure it's a big enough market for you to get funding if you're going to seek funding, and you want to make sure that audience has a big problem. You don't tell them what you think the problem is. You ask them, and you make sure that they're telling you, my biggest problems are, and hopefully the idea you have solves one of those big problems. Then you talk to them about the solution to solve it in the way they want. You figure out pricing, and then you have a much more legitimate shot at building a successful company, rather than skipping that step. And the other, ran out of cash, just simply means you didn't have traction for some reason. Could it be because you didn't have product market fit, but you didn't get enough sales, which provides you cash, or you didn't get funding, and funding comes from having traction. That's where they fund. And so those are two big reasons that someone will run out of cash.
Yeah. I always hear these, especially in the bear market over the last, 2 years or so. A lot of startups, they talk about runway, and basically, in bear markets, it's kind of just basically cut expenses, increase your runway, and if you can survive, then you're better positioned.
Right. Yeah, and it's a bear market for a couple reasons. One is what you said. People, may not be buying from you as much as you thought they would or they used to. And the other bear market, of course, is venture has very dried up quite a bit. Unless you're doing something really exciting in generative AI, it's going to be a slog to get funding if you're seeking venture capital funding, let's say.
Yeah, and so now we're on the topic of sales. What are some of the mistakes startups make in the sales area?
There's quite a few. I think the biggest mistakes that I see are, of course, they don't have product market fit, so they can't make a sale. But if they do have product market fit, the startup founder needs to aggressively go out, make it a priority to go out and get the first few sales. And sometimes they're juggling so many things, they don't make time for that. But it is once you have product market fit, it's the most important thing to do is to go get sales. And if you're struggling to get the first few sales, you need to go get help. And you should go back to the people you interviewed in the product market fit stage. And then once you've made a few sales, then and you know that it's a sort of predictable, like I talk to these kind of companies, I talk to these sort of contacts, I provide a proposal, they buy. You do that a few times. Now you have, most likely, you have a predictable, repeatable sales model. And now you can hire somebody, and if you're hiring salespeople, and you can actually hand them a pattern that works. And then you can refine it with them over time. But another, so not doing those things is something I see. They'll hire a salesperson before they really have a repeatable pattern, and so, or they stay in the sales position too long, they don't hire somebody. I think another one, just taking a step back, is moving to a model where you're going to use salespeople when instead you may be able to actually use a business development approach where you don't even hire salespeople. You partner with, a large company in your space that already has distribution. They already have a large sales force, big marketing muscle, and you partner with them and they help you get distribution, and you do a revenue share or something, and you can move a lot faster, a lot cheaper, and reduce your customer acquisition costs. And so just not even considering some of these things is another big mistake. And that's usually just because people don't know. They don't know that that's available to them, or it might make sense for their business.
Yeah. How do founders know when they're ready to scale their startup sales?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really comes, after they've made a few sales and they have they're starting to see a pattern, because once they know, because if you're selling to, let's say you're selling to companies, okay, there's a bazillion companies in the world, right? So you can't boil the ocean, as they say, right? If your first few customers tend to come from these 2 or 3, 4 industries, let's focus on those and then see which one's the best one. And then when you find that pattern, then you start scaling for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And it's all about traction, and then basically, product market fit. And then once you have that, Series A, which is quite interesting. The other question, when basically sales, there's this great book by Reid Hoffman, Masters of Scale, and talking about the early days of Airbnb, and was a Y Combinator. They were telling the founders to do things that don't scale so that you can understand that. What are the biggest mistakes basically in automating sales and with the sales process? What are those biggest issues?
So I think the biggest issues in sales, when you talk about, let's say, automating and whatnot, or sales process in any company, is a surprising number of companies I've run across, they have an organized system. Right. So it's thinking through the whole process, like, how do I get leads in the first place? Right. Am I writing content? Am I creating videos? Am I attracting leads through these sources? And how am I getting them in? Once they hit my website, what are the steps they go through to buy or to get to a salesperson, depending? And have I really thought through that journey? Like, what is going on in the buyer's mind? What do they need at each stage of their journey? And am I walking them through that on my website? Because you're trying to compress the amount of time it takes to go from a new lead to closed one deal, right? Money in the bank. And so you're trying to move friction, anything that slows it down, creates obstacles. There's a lot of friction points that are there that people just don't know are there. And they're just not looking at the process carefully.
The other question is, product market fit, and then how you increase your company's sales velocity, growing revenue.
Yeah, no, a great question. So velocity, I think, comes from kind of like, to piggyback on or to dovetail on what I was just saying, is you start with the goal. You say, by this, let's say you have a sales cycle that's 6 months, right? So you say, okay, in 6 months, I need, these numbers. Then you go backwards and you say, to get one deal, let's say you need 10 deals. Okay. To get 10 deals, I need 50 sales qualified leads to have a sales call with. That usually boils down to 10 deals, which is a close rate of 20%, which is about what would make sense across industries. Your particular industry may differ. And then going to get 50 sales qualified leads, how many marketing qualified leads do I need? Right. So now I know how I have to invest in marketing and invest in sales in order to get this goal, at time X, right? Based on how long it takes me to close a deal. So in that process, you look at industry statistics, like I was just mentioning, like for my industry, how many sales qualified leads do I need to get to a closed one? Then you look at your numbers, and if you're getting a 5% close ratio and your industry is 20%, then you need to start scrutinizing, what are we doing in the sales process? Because we should be closing about 4 times what we're closing, right? So that's where they're removing the fat and so on. So basically, it's figure out your numbers that you need, find your bottlenecks, and find your friction and fat and eliminate them.
Yeah, I love this whole reverse engineering. And every time I talk to, first time I've talked to, startup founder in this, but if it's realtors or whatever, it's like basically a number, and you have a process, and basically you just crank out, you just execute, and exactly. Which is it's like a numbers game.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of you've done it in a lot of entrepreneur startups, they've been in this. What would you do differently, and how to begin the startup the right way? Kind of share some of your insights.
What would I do differently? Well, I think we hung on to like at LeadCrunch, my first tech startup. I think we just hung on to certain markets too long. Like we had probably 4 or 5 pivots until we hit pay dirt. And I think we were in markets that weren't VC fundable, and we were seeking VC funding. And you have to kind of know, like, we were so clueless. We just didn't know that, we were in a market this size. VCs need markets at least this size, like in the billions, right? And I think we stayed there too long when we were, there was too many signals that we didn't have product market fit. But we didn't really understand that, and so we stayed too long. But then we almost ran out of cash 3 times. We made everything I'm telling you not to do, I've probably done at some point.
It's interesting. It's like these crazy tales, and I'm always reading these bios of startup founder, Airbnb, Uber, all these great companies these days. But early days, it's almost like it's like a scrappy. You have to like fight it.
Yeah. Totally, very scrappy. Absolutely.
Yeah. So really interesting. How can people interested follow you? I know you're on LinkedIn. Check out your work, your social media, etc.
Yeah. So if you go to bolt.io, you can get information on my services, which is fractional sales leadership for companies. And you can also get to my, so a lot of the things I'm saying about, are really aimed at, technically oriented founders. And after mentoring a lot of them in incubators and working with some of them as customers, I started finding that I was saying the same thing over and over again. So I created a course, an online course called Sales for Startups, and I priced it really cheap, and you can accomplish it in like a few hours. But to cover all these things that I keep saying over and over again, but I really I don't want people to fail for avoidable reasons, right? There's so many things that can kill you in a startup. It really shouldn't be not understanding the very basics that, so I put them all in this course, and you can get to that course from my website and my YouTube channel and so on.
I love that. And I love this conversation. For all the audience out there, especially interested in tech, startup entrepreneurship, this podcast with Sanjit is a great resources, and he's on LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. All these will be in the show notes and the resources. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Lou, and good luck to all the entrepreneurs out there.
I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.